to the APS webinar series. Today we have got a Q&A with Alan Milne, who is the company director, owner of Modular Building Consultants. Modular Building Institute just jumped up, which is why I nearly said the wrong place. He recently became the European member director for the Modular Building Institute. We're going to jump straight into the questions there. Snigda asked, please could you elaborate on the replacement disassembly for elements such as bathroom pods as a whole or in parts? So is there anything you can kind of give us on that?
So I just missed the start of that, sorry.
Could you elaborate on the replacement process and disassembly for elements such as bathroom pods?
All right, so we're looking at bathroom pods as a solution. Well, where bathroom pods can fit into different categories as far as they can be used as part of a modular construction. So they can be complete units that are then slotted in. They're not structural. Bathroom pods tend not to be structural elements. They just tend to be complete boxes of a process where there's a lot of fit out, a lot of plumbing, a lot of quality control elements if you have it on site that are very difficult to manage and keep consistent quality. So we're bringing all of that within the factory environment, within one section, one element, then it's easier to control that. They're also used in refurbishment, where an existing building shell is completely empty, and then these are used to be slot in as, again, very, very quick way of installing that part of the building. Or they can be used in a combination where you've got a traditional build construction of a steel frame construction, and then the modules are used. So there's an element of MMC offsite construction as the bathroom pods that are slotted in. Same kitchens are the same kitchen pods as well. There is also mechanical and electrical systems can be combined into one section and plopped in and then reconnected to on site.
Thank you so much. Jonathan asks, how does this now comply with the Building Safety Act / new building regulations coming in? I imagine it's quite difficult.
No difference in what it needs to comply with. So yeah, I mean, it's fully compliant. We work very, very closely with all regulations, and especially with building and safety regs as well. So no difference at all.
Thank you so much. We're going to have a few Building Safety Act questions, I imagine. It's the APS is heavily involved in. So John asks, is there a maximum height for the construction of modular buildings, and how and when does the Building Safety Act roles interface?
Right, there's no maximum height. I think the buildings in Croydon, they put me to test how many floors they are. I think there might be 20, at least 20 plus. They were the highest modular construction in Europe for a long time. Wow. And I think they maybe still are. They were globally the highest peak, but I think Malaysia is trying to push beyond that as well. So basically, again, just follows, it's a method of construction rather than a separation of construction. So just another method of construction. So everything else is applicable as it would do with a traditional method. There is no, with building codes, with everything else, there is no difference. There's no separation between how you address modular construction and how you address any other type of construction. It's just a different method, that's all.
It's interesting because you'd think that it's slightly different, but within the framework, it's obviously the same.
It's exact same, yeah.
Yeah, but because of the difference, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, where the difference happens between when you're looking at building codes, for example, building approval, building control, where the difference is instead of having all that assessment on site as you would a traditional build as it's created on site, you have off-site assessment. So it's very easy, again, whether you are looking at from a health and safety as principal designer, it's very easy to look at the process and look at the process developing in a nice controlled environment rather than having to do it on site during construction.
Yeah, agreed. Giovanni makes a comment, so you're more than welcome to reply to this. He works as a consultant to a hotel chain that builds 3D modular hotels all over Europe. There are 11 in the UK. A hotel with 140 rooms takes about 6 to 8 months to complete. It also takes approximately 40 weeks to build the required units, plug and play ready, in a factory located in northern Italy. The main issue, though, is that the shipping abroad and the logistics to lift the units in place, which is similar to what you said with the movement. So thank you very much for your comment there, Giovanni. Did you have anything in response to that, Alan, or just kind of
get a local manufacturer and then get a manufacturer to, well, it's a very good point he makes, because there is a lot of manufacturers who will have strategic a lot of clients, a lot of developers who will have strategic modular suppliers in the particular country that they're building in. So that helps to reduce that issue with transportation.
Thank you ever so much. Richard asks, we hear from government, so this is, you touched on you touched on this towards the end. We hear from government about the need for very significant new build housing numbers. Would you say that modular is the way to go? Are there any lifespan issues, or is there potential for the architectural flair being restricted? And do you think that this is a good idea to reach those high numbers?
Yeah, I think it can. I think modular, first question or the first point, modular can provide that gap. It needs to look at how it's going to do that now, because if you'd asked me that question 2 years ago, there was enough big volume producers available to fill that gap. Unfortunately, the pipeline didn't come through quick enough, so a lot of those companies have not survived. So there is a void in the market just now, which is a challenge, because the process of building in this way can provide the solution, but it's whether we don't have enough manufacturers at this stage to do that. So that's one of the major issues as we take it forward.
Thank you so much. Matthew says, I think you've dealt with this question already, but if there's anything you'd like to add, but I think you have dealt with this question. What do you consider the barriers to modular construction? Why is it not used more? I think we've touched on that towards the end, so we'll leave that question. Sorry, Matthew. I think Alan answered it just as you put the question in. Michaela asks, what is the probability of damage during transportation? And if the units do get damaged, who's responsible for this?
Good question. Yeah, the chances are very minimum, but I'll touch wood on that because I've got a few modular movements happening soon. So they tend not to be an issue. If it is an issue, it falls on the manufacturer. They ensure they're responsible. It's a very good question, because who is responsible for the product and how is the product put together? And it comes back to the contract. The contract's so important. Traditional contracts don't work with modular, and you have to adapt them a lot. Now, when you do the stage payments for modular, you still do not have responsibility from an insurance perspective. So the manufacturer takes that insurance responsibility all through the process. There should be risk assessed as well. So what happens if a module is damaged? Because if it's 150 modules, for example, going onto site, and modular 24 is damaged, you cannot necessarily replace 24 with 25.
Yeah.
So that means that project's waiting on module 24 to be replaced. So we always look at a project and say, right, what is the contingency here if there is a damaged module or damaged modules? How quick can they be replaced? But it is the manufacturer that takes responsibility. It's a very good question.
Thank you, Alan. I told you they'd be good questions. I
told you. Absolutely.
Keith asks, how can moisture ingress damage be reduced during transportation of volumetric units?
Most of the modules are wrapped. They're wrapped to visqueen or similar, which is a sort of plastic. They're then shrink wrapped. So that's all basically done in the factory. So they're completely sealed between leaving the factory environment and until they get to site. So once they're on site, they are just finally opened up before connection, so they can be craned into position, and then the visqueen is taken off just before the final installation. Sorry, Tommy, I'm just going to cover the question on lifespan. Sorry, there was another point that was earlier raised. What is the lifespan? And the lifespan of the buildings, there's no independent assessment, and the building lifespans are 100 years plus. So there's no difference really in what you would expect from other building method to modular.
Amazing, amazing. Timothy asks or comments, we are investigating using modular buildings for admin and control rooms on process plants. Do you have any experience of this?
Yes, I've done quite a few on various. I mean, we've covered everything from laboratories. We're doing a very sort of high-tech laboratory. We've done, the medical side, the hospital labs. The next sort of big growth area, I think, is going to be the the server centers. As more servers are required, there's a big growth area in there. So yeah, we're covering such a wide area of experience on that side. that it's not just modular use for living accommodation or office accommodation. It's becoming used for far more. And we have done it over the years. We've got different elements we need to look at. We need to look at how those environments are controlled. We need to look at floor loadings, depending on equipment that's going in there as well. So it does bring in different challenges, but it all can be, unless it's something really extraordinary, it can be dealt with using construction of modular units.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And obviously, if you'd like to reach out, Alan's details are on the page, and I will be sending them out to everyone that has attended. Robert asks, how low is the low in suitable to low volume projects for modular to be beneficial?
Right, depending on the manufacturer, some manufacturers who are specializing in that low volume marketplace. So there's some that will look at being very nimble. They're smaller businesses, and they're very nimble at reacting, and they can do small volumes. The sweet spot is probably for those ones is probably about between 20 and 50 modules. That's the market they work in, not high. Your likes of your mass factories are looking at 200, 300, 400 modules per project.
Wow.
And a lot of these manufacturers, when you approach them, if you don't have that number, they won't take it on. And it's not that they've got an arrogance about it, it's just how they're geared up. They've got such an overhead of a factory that needs to be fed with high volume. Whereas a smaller, and there's a lot of good, which if it makes contact, I can send some information. There's a lot of very, very good small volume manufacturers out there. And the low volume, as I say, can be, I mean, there's a couple of projects we've got that are 10 modules. And 10 modules, 5 modules is getting really, really small. But yeah, they go right the way down, but potentially the sweet spot 20 to 50 is it's where you'll find most suppliers will reply and provide most variety.
Thank you so much, everyone. I've had to close the questions because we've just hit 19 questions, so we're just going to do the last 4 or 5, and then we'll leave it there. So we're just going to thank Alan for his time today. It's been absolutely brilliant. So Stigda, who spoke earlier on about replacement and disassembly, she also wanted to know. They also wanted to know, apologies, what's the procedure for replacement and disassembly after the pods are in?
All right. Is that well, okay. If they need to be removed again, is that
I think that's the question.
On a temporary solution? Okay. Well, most of the projects we're involved with is a permanent solution. However, if there's an exit strategy by a client who's saying, look, we need to be in here, and we do have some projects like that where there's maybe a 5-year requirement or a 10-year requirement, and after that, for whatever reason, the building has to be removed, it can be easily disassembled. And there's 2 options at that point. The building can be disassembled and then basically moved to another site to be reused again. And there is, it's one of the variables with building codes and the building control in England and in Scotland and Ireland, is that if you move that building to another site, you get a dispensation because you're using that embodied carbon, and so you don't have to always hit the current energy targets. You've got a sort of step down so that you're allowed to reuse those modules again. Or they can be disassembled and recycled as component parts.
Thank you ever so much. 140 of you are still with us. We should only be another 5-6 minutes. If you do have to go, I completely understand. This will be.
I can stay longer. It's fine. I'm
thank you. Thank you.
I can happy to hang on.
This is amazing. Thank you. Well, I'll show you all the lovely comments that are coming up as well in a second. So Emmanuel says, thanks, Alan, for today. It's been brilliant. With all the positive reasons for modular construction and acknowledging the pipeline as the issue for modular construction not taking off as hoped, there is also a lot of concerning examples in the news. There is a highlighted by the, I think, Department of Education, the Purple Cube in Falmouth. Are you aware of this, or is there any comments you'd like to make on it, or?
Sorry, I missed bits of that. Sorry, I missed.
No worries. I think there's an incident with a Purple Cube in Falmouth. That was
Purple Cube,
and we don't know about it. There's a student block. So it's a Caledonian Modular. Working on a student block.
Yeah. Well, Caledonian Modular are no longer in business. So this is it's a good point they've made, because what happens is sometimes, unfortunately, project goes through, and we get asked this at the beginning when we get involved with a client: what if who we've chosen to provide this building, the manufacturer, halfway through the project goes out of business. We're left at whatever stage and in a vulnerable circumstance where we may have to get someone else in to finish the project. And there's probably about 3 or 4 that I'm aware of in the UK, that being one of them, where someone else has to come in and try and pick up the pieces and either salt or rectify a complete building or try and finish a half-finished building. It's a very difficult situation. All I would say is that it's no different from the issue you would occur with a traditional build if a builder goes bust. However, when you are using a system, the most vulnerable part is if something happens at the very early stage. If it happens when the modules are all in place and connected and complete, then it's less of a risk to the client. So there's the risk diminishes as you get nearer the end, as it would a traditional build. But it's a very, very difficult, and it's an area you do not want to be in as a client. So unfortunately, it's a challenge. It can be resolved. What we tend to look at is ways that we can de-risk that by including it in the contract, that we are allowed to bring in our team, if you like, to come and resolve the issue and take over. Because normally, if worst case, we've had this where a factory goes out of business, the staff are still there, the equipment's still there. And depending on how that wind up is occurring as far as closing the business, it's in everybody's interest to finish any outstanding project. So they can then go in with the management team, take over that situation, and use the staff, use the product, all the materials. Because even if a business is in a wind up procedure to close, it's still better than finishing a project and getting that revenue in. And it's best for every party. So yeah, there is ways we can mitigate it, but it's not a situation that you want to be in.
Thank you so much. Really great answer. Robert says, as modular construction takes place in a factory or manufacturing environment, do CDM regulations apply? Also, could you clarify, is it called modular construction or is it modular manufacturing? I think you've already answered this one, but...
It's both. Well, I'll answer the last one. Modular construction and modular manufacturing. It's very confusing, the industry, and I use different terminologies as well. It's really modular is the process, and it can be modular. It can be 3D modular. It can be modular construction, modular manufacturing. It's just the same thing. And apologies if it does come across as different ones.
No,
it's very similar. As regards CDM, yeah, I mean CDM is relevant. It's easier to control the factory element, like everything else is, and we always would say what we sometimes get is a principal designer can be normally part of the manufacturer's team from the early days, and they will follow it all the way through. So they'll be aware of the system limitations during design phase to try and design out any health and safety issues, depending on how that design is altered for that particular project. Also, when it's on site, they understand the methods of installation and craneage, those high risk areas. So it's always better if that principal designer is part of the manufacturing team and part of that construction. And when I say construction team, normally the principal contractor is the manufacturer. So they will take the principal contractor will be the manufacturer, and they will have that in-house principal designer.
Thank you so much. We've got 2 questions left. John says, is there an early design intent to go completely modular / off-site build for an awkward site location? Do you recommend a site route transportation auto tracking type audit / risk assessment by a company in case of bridges, narrow roads, etc.? What would you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely.
Question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the most important thing at the beginning is to look at this, and I keep emphasizing this because I've seen it so many times where the design is done, in the worst case, the design is done, it's been designed for manufacture and assembly, but someone's decided that the most efficient way to do a particular design was to do, for example, 4.5 meter modules. And this is, I'm quoting an example here, 4.5 meter modules. Everybody just continued on designing the building because the wider you make the modules, the more efficient it is. So I understand why that happened, but they make wider modules. They get to the fact where they start to ship them across to the site, and they realize that they couldn't get to A to B because a particular section of road, and they ended up, they could only move 2 modules a week. Oof. Whereas normally we would look to install, a good installation team will do 10 modules a day. So in the course of a week, you do 2 modules instead of 50 modules. It's a massive, massive impact on cost, all because nobody decided to look at that link between the transport. So the question is really relevant, and it's at very, very early stage. That transport assessment on both the site and the route to site has to be carried out. And as the question was put as well, it's simple things like low bridges, road access, road restriction times, everything else, because you may find that you may have to reduce the module sizes.
Yeah.
And if you do not know the parameters, and the parameters can be set by that route, then you can be designing something that is just an absolute no-no to get from the factory to the site.
Thank you very much. I like that answer. We're going to give the last question now to James. So with regards to the demolition process, is this designed in the manufacture of modular builds?
If an existing building has been demolished?
No, apologies. So with regards to demolition, so when there's the manufacturing of the modular builds, is it kept in mind that these may need to be demolished?
Yeah, it's part of the life cycle, definitely. And I always look at what is the exit strategy. If there's no exit strategy and it's foreseeable future, great. If there is an exit strategy, then we would look, as I mentioned earlier, about how we would actually take that building and reuse that building and the options available for that. What we also look at is the materials now and how those materials at the end of life cycle can be put back in, so that most of the building can be dismantled and most of the product can be either safely disposed of or recycled. And that's all part of that process when we look at the actual design life and that circular design life at the end of the process as well. So it's very important that we look at the way that building components can be reused or recycled at the end of the process, whenever that may be.
No worries. Someone has just clarified a question that they asked that I read incorrectly. Would you mind if I just give it another?
Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies, Emmanuel. So there's a lot of concern about modular construction in the news related to safety and fire concerns. How do you feel about that? Do you have any comments on that?
I'd need to look at specifics. What I'm not seeing at the moment is any issues, because I know for a fact if there was any issues, it would be all over the news. If there was any major incident, touch wood, we don't want major incidents in any type of construction. What I would say is that from a manufacturing process, the health and safety is more controlled, as I mentioned through the presentation. When we get to the finished product, the processes are in place, the materials used, everything else is designed not to be combustible in any way, not to enhance fire. I think the cladding is probably where the issues lie, where there's external cladding put onto buildings. Within the modular structure itself, if it's manufactured correctly and the procedures are followed through, those examples I gave you of fire risers not being completed, that's just site errors. And we need to eliminate those. So I think if we can continually keep on top of those issues and making sure that it's manufactured and it's installed as per designed. And I think that's a case across all construction.
Oh, of course.
Modular is no different. Although we can control processes better during construction and the factory, it's still very important that we follow those processes all the way through.
Thank you ever so much, Alan. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to end the recording.